Imagine you're 7 months pregnant, living a dream life with your millionaire husband. You come home early from a doctor's appointment, excited to surprise him. But the surprise is on you. He's with another woman in your home, on your sofa. Your perfect world implodes. Every instinct screams to fight, to cry, to break something. But you don't. You do the one thing he never, ever expected. You turn around, close the door without a sound, and vanish completely. This is the story of the terrifying power of silence, and one woman's journey from a betrayed wife to an untouchable ghost. The air in the Pacific Heights penthouse was always still, a manufactured calm 30 stories above the fog-choked chaos of San Francisco. Amelia Hart often stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, her hands cradling the gentle swell of her belly, and felt like she was living in a snow globe. A perfect, curated world, beautiful to look at, but sealed off from reality. At 7 months pregnant, the world outside felt increasingly distant anyway. Her world had become this apartment, her love for her husband, Marcus, and the tiny, fluttering life inside her. Marcus Hart was a man forged in the crucible of Silicon Valley. He was a tech mogul, a self-made millionaire who'd built his empire on an algorithm that predicted market trends with unnerving accuracy. He was brilliant, ambitious, and devastatingly charming. When he looked at Amelia, his blue eyes, the color of a winter sky, would soften, and for those moments, she was the center of his vast, calculated universe. He'd swept her off her feet. She, an accomplished architect with a promising career, had been captivated by his force-of-nature personality. He didn't just enter a room, he conquered it. He'd promised her the world, and on the surface, he had delivered. Lately, though, a subtle dissonance had crept into their perfect harmony. The late nights at the office became more frequent, the investor dinners more common. He'd come home smelling of expensive whiskey and a fatigue that wasn't just work-related. When she'd press a hand to his chest, she could feel the frantic hummingbird beat of his heart, a rhythm that didn't match his placid excuses. He'd kiss her forehead, murmur, "Just closing a big deal, Amelia. For us. For the baby." And the explanation felt both plausible and paper-thin. She'd dismissed her own anxieties as hormonal, the nesting jitters of a first-time mother. Marcus was a man of immense pressure. Of course, he was stressed. She trusted him. To not trust Marcus would be to admit the entire foundation of her life was a lie, and the thought was too terrifying to entertain. That Tuesday began like any other. Marcus had left before dawn, kissing her sleeping form goodbye. Her day was filled with a prenatal yoga class and a final review of the nursery designs she'd painstakingly created, a serene space of soft grays, warm woods, and a hand-painted mural of a moonlit forest. Her doctor's appointment in the afternoon had been a joy. Dr. Anya Sharma had smiled, the ultrasound gel cool on Amelia's skin, and said, "Baby heart is looking perfect, strong heartbeat, growing right on schedule." A wave of pure, uncomplicated love had washed over Amelia. She'd left the clinic glowing, deciding to surprise Marcus. He was supposed to be in a board meeting until 8, but she'd pick up his favorite Cioppino from a little place in North Beach and have it waiting for him. A small, intimate celebration of their healthy baby. The elevator ride up to the penthouse was filled with this quiet, happy anticipation. The doors opened directly into their foyer, a grand space with a single, dramatic sculpture Marcus had bought at auction. As she stepped out, juggling the takeout bag, the first thing she noticed was the silence. It was the wrong kind of silence, not the empty peace of a vacant home, but a heavy, occupied hush. Her heart gave a little trip. "Marcus?" she called out, her voice sounding small in the cavernous space. No answer. She set the bag down on the marble console table. A pair of women's heels, thin black stilettos she'd never seen before, were lying carelessly by the door. They looked predatory, stark against the creamy white marble, A cold dread, sharp and swift, pierced through the warm bubble of her happiness. She walked further in, her bare feet silent on the polished floor. The living area was a masterpiece of modern design, all clean lines and muted colors, dominated by the panoramic view of the Golden Gate Bridge. And there, on their custom-made charcoal sofa, was the tableau that would forever be seared into her memory. Marcus was there, his back partially to her. He was leaning over a woman, his shirt unbuttoned, his familiar, expensive cologne mixing with a cloying, sweet perfume she didn't recognize. The woman was laughing, a low, throaty sound that scraped against Amelia's nerves. She had hair the color of spilled ink and was wearing a slip of a red dress that had ridden high up her thighs. A half-empty bottle of Veuve Clicquot, their celebration champagne, sat sweating on the coffee table next to a single, long-stemmed glass. The world didn't crash. It didn't explode. It simply stopped. The city lights outside blurred into a smear of indifferent glitter. The hum of the refrigerator became a deafening roar. Every detail sharpened with horrifying clarity. The way the woman's red-painted nails were tracing the line of Marcus's jaw. The casual intimacy of his hand on her knee. The look of rapt attention on his face. A look he used to give only to her. He hadn't heard her come in. They were in their own world, a bubble of betrayal inside her snow globe. For a long, suspended moment, Amelia couldn't breathe. It was a physical paralysis, a seizing of her lungs and limbs. Her first instinct, a primal scream of rage and grief, died in her throat. Her second, a torrent of tears, felt like a concession she was unwilling to make. What would happen if she screamed? A messy, ugly scene. He would spin a story, his silver tongue weaving excuses and apologies. He would try to manage her, to control her reaction, to absorb her pain into his narrative of a simple mistake. And in that split second of horrifying clarity, something inside her shifted. A new instinct, cold and hard as diamond, rose from the depths of her shock. It was an instinct for self-preservation, but more than that, for the preservation of the child she carried. Her baby did not deserve to be born into the shrapnel of a screaming match. Her baby deserved peace. She would not give him the drama. She would not give him a scene to fix. She would give him nothing. Without a sound, she began to move in reverse. Her feet, numb and clumsy, found their way backward. She retreated past the kitchen, its sterile steel surfaces gleaming. She backed into the foyer, her eyes locked on the scene that was still playing out, oblivious, on the sofa. Her hand found the cool metal of the doorknob. Marcus must have sensed a change in the air, a flicker of movement in his peripheral vision. He turned his head. His eyes met hers across the vast expanse of the room, time fractured. The soft, charming look on his face evaporated, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. His mouth fell open slightly. The woman, Tessa Amelia would later learn her name was, looked up, her expression shifting from seduction to confusion. Marcus started to rise, his hands coming up in a gesture of placation. "Amelia," he began, his voice a strangled whisper. But Amelia was already gone. She didn't slam the door. She pulled it shut with a quiet, decisive click that echoed in the sudden silence louder than any shout ever could. She pressed the button for the elevator, her body a rigid column of control. As the bronze doors slid shut, she saw his reflection for a final second, a man frozen in the ruins of the world he had just destroyed. Inside the mirrored elevator, she didn't look at herself. She couldn't bear to see the woman with the dead eyes and the pregnant belly. She stared straight ahead as the penthouse, her home, her gilded cage, ascended away from her, leaving her in a free fall. The silence was her only weapon, her only shield. It was the last thing she had that was truly hers, and she wielded it with the cold precision of a surgeon. She had walked in a wife, She walked out a ghost. The elevator deposited her in the opulent, marble-clad lobby. The doorman, a kind-faced man named George, who always saved her a copy of the Chronicle, tipped his hat. "Good evening, Mrs. Hart. A bit late for you." Amelia managed a nod, a twitch of her lips that was a grotesque parody of a smile. "Just forgot something, George," she murmured, her voice sounding alien to her own ears. She stepped out into the damp San Francisco night. The fog was rolling in, thick and wet, swallowing the tops of buildings and muffling the sounds of the city into a distant, mournful hum. It felt appropriate, a physical manifestation of the fog that had descended over her own mind. She walked without direction, her car keys feeling heavy and useless in her hand. Where would she go? Her entire life, her present and her future, was in that apartment upstairs with him. Her feet carried her block after block. The chic storefronts of Pacific Heights gave way to the bustling noise of Union Square. The faces of strangers swam past her, laughing couples, tired commuters, tourists snapping photos, each one a painful reminder of a life that was no longer hers. The bag of Cioppino was still sitting on the console table upstairs, a pathetic monument to her naivety. An hour later, she found herself standing in front of a nondescript hotel in Soma, one of those places that catered to business travelers and offered anonymity. She walked in, her posture ramrod straight, and booked a room for one night using her personal credit card, a card Marcus probably didn't even know she still had. The room was sterile and impersonal. 2 queen beds, a generic print of the Golden Gate Bridge on the wall, and a window overlooking a brick alleyway. It was perfect. It was a blank slate. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, the iron control she had maintained since leaving the penthouse shattered into a million pieces. A low, guttural sound tore from her throat, a sound of such profound agony it barely seemed human. She stumbled to the bed and collapsed, her body finally succumbing to the violent shudders she had suppressed. The tears came then, hot and furious, soaking the cheap polyester bedspread. It wasn't just grief. It was a visceral, physical purge of the poison of his betrayal. Every shared laugh, every tender touch, every whispered promise was now tainted, replaying in her mind as a cruel deception. How long had it been going on? The woman? She was young, maybe mid-20s, an intern, a junior associate. The power imbalance was sickening. He hadn't just cheated on his pregnant wife. He had used his position, his power, to prey on someone younger, someone who probably saw him as a god. Her rage was a white-hot fire, but beneath it was a deep, chilling current of fear. She was 7 months pregnant. She had left her career to build a home with him. Her name was on the deed to the penthouse, yes. But his money, his lawyers, his influence, they were a fortress. He could crush her. Sometime around 3 a.m., her phone, which had been silent in her purse, began to buzz incessantly. She pulled it out. Marcus, 27 missed calls. Marcus, 14 new texts. She opened the messages, her thumb hovering over the screen. "Amelia, where are you? Please, just talk to me. It's not what it looked like. I can explain everything. I am so sorry. So sorry. I love you. Amelia, please. I'm going out of my mind. Are you safe? Is the baby okay? Just tell me you're safe." The words were a blur. They were his words, his script. The Marcus Hart Damage Control Protocol. He wasn't sorry he had done it. He was sorry he'd been caught. His concern for the baby was a weapon, a hook to reel her back in. She felt a surge of cold fury. He would not use their child against her. With a final, decisive movement, she powered the phone off. Then, for good measure, she snapped the SIM card in half and flushed the pieces down the toilet. She watched them swirl and disappear. It was a small act of destruction, but it was hers. She was severing the link. She was going dark. The next morning, She woke to the gray light of dawn, her body aching and her eyes swollen shut. But in the quiet of the hotel room, a fragile sense of purpose began to form. She wasn't just a victim. She was Amelia Hart. Before Marcus, she was an architect who could command a boardroom, who could turn empty space into something beautiful and strong. She had friends. She had a family. She had a mind that was still hers. She thought of her best friend from college, Jasmine Lee. Jasmine was a family law attorney in Portland, Oregon. She was sharp, fiercely loyal, and had never been Marcus's biggest fan. She'd once called him lethally charming, a phrase Amelia had laughed at the time. It no longer seemed funny. Amelia used the hotel phone to call her. When Jasmine picked up, her voice warm and groggy, Amelia's own voice broke. "Jasmine," she whispered. "I need help." She didn't have to say more. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Jasmine's voice was crisp and clear. "All business." "Where are you? Don't tell me, just listen. Go to an ATM, take out as much cash as you can. Buy a burner phone. I'm booking you a flight to Portland under your maiden name, Amelia Hart. It leaves SFO in 3 hours. Can you do that?" "Yes," Amelia said, a wave of relief so potent it made her dizzy. "Good, we'll handle the rest from here. Just get to me, Amelia. Get on that plane." Following Jasmine's instructions gave her a mission. It pulled her out of the morass of her own thoughts. She checked out of the hotel, paid in cash, and took a taxi to a corner store where she bought a cheap prepaid phone. At the airport, she moved like a fugitive, her head down, her coat collar pulled up. Every time she saw a man in an expensive suit, her heart leaped into her throat. As the plane to Portland ascended, piercing through the thick layer of clouds into brilliant, blinding sunshine, Amelia felt a symbolic shift. She was leaving the fog behind. Down below, Marcus was likely in a state of controlled panic. He would be calling hospitals, friends, her parents. He would be leveraging his connections, trying to track her digital footprint. But she had left no footprint. She had simply vanished. He had expected tears and accusations. He had prepared for a fight he knew he could win. He had not prepared for the void. He had not prepared for silence. And in his world of noise, data, and constant communication, her silence would be the most terrifying, most powerful weapon of all. She was no longer a piece on his chessboard. She had knocked the entire board over and walked away. Marcus Hart was a man who did not tolerate loose ends. His life was a series of meticulously planned acquisitions. Companies, properties, relationships. He controlled outcomes. When Amelia walked out, it wasn't just a marital crisis, it was a catastrophic system failure. For the first hour after she left, he was frozen. A statue of disbelief in his own living room. Tessa, the young marketing associate from his firm, was attempting to put herself back together, her voice a nervous tremor. "Marcus, who was that? Oh my God, was that your wife?" "Get out," Marcus said, his voice dangerously low. "But I said get out!" he roared, the sound echoing in the vast, silent space. He didn't watch her scramble for her shoes and her purse. He was staring at the front door, at the empty space where Amelia had stood. He had seen the look in her eyes. It wasn't the fury he'd expected. It was worse. It was a look of finality, as if she were looking at a ghost. Once he was alone, his training kicked in. Assess the damage. Mitigate. Control the narrative. He started calling her phone, straight to voicemail. He sent a barrage of texts, cycling through apology, concern, and a thinly veiled command to come back. Silence. By midnight, panic was beginning to gnaw at the edges of his composure. He called her parents in San Diego, feigning casual concern. "Hi, Susan, it's Marcus. Is Amelia with you by any chance? We had a silly tiff, and she went out for some air. Just want to make sure she's okay." Her mother's worried voice confirmed she wasn't there. "A tiff? Marcus, she's 7 months pregnant. You need to find her." He called her closest friends. None had heard from her. The silence from her end was absolute. a black hole that was sucking in all of his attempts at contact. He paced the penthouse, the city lights mocking him. This magnificent apartment, a symbol of his success, suddenly felt like a prison. Her scent lingered on the pillows. Her pregnancy vitamins were on the kitchen counter. The nursery, her sanctuary, was a silent accusation. He opened the door and stood there, overwhelmed by the soft, hopeful world she had built for a future he had just incinerated. The next day, he hired a private investigator, a discreet and expensive one he'd used for corporate espionage. "Find my wife," he ordered. "She's pregnant, she's emotional. Her name is Amelia Hart. Check credit card transactions, flight manifests, car rentals. I want to know where she is by the end of the day." But the end of the day came with a frustrating report. "She checked into a hotel last night, the Omni in Soma," the PI said over the phone. "Paid cash. Checked out this morning, used an ATM near there, withdrew the maximum. Then her trail goes cold. Her primary credit cards are untouched. Her car is still in your garage. Her phone is off the network. It's like she's a ghost. A ghost." The word chilled him. Amelia, his gentle, predictable Amelia, had become a ghost. She had always been the stable anchor in his chaotic life. He hadn't realized until now how much he relied on that anchor. He had believed he was the strong one, the protector. In reality, she was the foundation, and he had just dynamited it. Days turned into a week. His work suffered. He was distracted, irritable. He snapped at his board members and fired Tessa with a severance package so large it was clearly hush money. He wanted to erase the mistake, but the evidence of his transgression was everywhere and nowhere at once. He saw Amelia in every pregnant woman on the street. He'd hear a laugh that sounded like hers, and his head would whip around. The power imbalance he had always taken for granted was now inverted. He had all the money and influence in the world, but he was powerless to fix this. He couldn't buy her forgiveness. He couldn't command her to return. Her silence was a form of psychological warfare he was completely unprepared for. It stripped him of his tools: charm, persuasion, negotiation. How do you negotiate with a void? He started to unravel. He drank more, slept less. The penthouse became his tomb. He'd sit in the dark, staring at the phone, willing it to ring. He reread their old text messages, searching for clues. For the moment, he had started to lose her. Was it when he'd started working with Tessa? Was it the trip to Tokyo he'd taken without her? He'd told himself these were harmless flirtations, ego boosts for a man terrified of the impending domesticity of fatherhood. He loved Amelia. He was sure of it. But he was also pathologically selfish, a trait that had served him well in business but had now cost him his life. The PI finally called with a lead 2 weeks later. "We have a possible sighting. A woman matching her description boarded a flight to Portland, Oregon, 2 weeks ago. The ticket was purchased last minute under the name Amelia Hart." Amelia Hart, her maiden name? It was a deliberate, symbolic act. She wasn't Mrs. Hart anymore, just her own person. Portland, Marcus breathed. Of course, Jasmine Lee, her fiercely protective friend, the lawyer. He should have known. He booked the first flight out. He didn't have a plan. He just knew he had to see her, to break this unbearable silence. He would apologize, beg, plead. He would buy her a new house in Portland, fund her own architectural firm, whatever it took. He would fix this. He was Marcus Hart. He always fixed things. Portland was green and wet, a world away from the sun-bleached modernity of Marcus's San Francisco. The air smelled of damp earth and pine needles. For Amelia, it was a balm. Jasmine lived in a cozy craftsman house in the Laurelhurst neighborhood, with a sprawling garden and a scruffy terrier named Gus. It was a home, not a showcase. The first 2 weeks were a blur of sleep, tears, and Jasmine's quiet, steady presence. Jasmine didn't pry or offer platitudes. She made her tea, ensured she ate, and handled everything. She'd found a top-tier obstetrician and a therapist specializing in trauma. Most importantly, she'd filed for legal separation on Amelia's behalf. "We're filing in Oregon," Jasmine explained one evening as they sat on the porch watching the rain. "We'll establish residency. The grounds are irreconcilable differences. We'll cite his infidelity, but we don't need to get messy in the initial filing. The goal is a clean break, Amelia. Full custody of the baby, with supervised visitation for him at your discretion. And we will go after him for child support that reflects his income, and spousal support that acknowledges the career you sacrificed for him." Amelia nodded, the legal terms washing over her. "He'll fight it." "Let him," Jasmine said, her dark eyes glinting. "He's a bully, Amelia. And bullies are cowards when you stand up to them with a solid legal strategy. His power is in his money and his reputation. We will threaten both if he doesn't cooperate." But Amelia's healing wasn't happening in legal documents. It was happening in the small, quiet moments. It was the feel of Gus's head on her lap. It was walking through the Portland Japanese garden, the silence there peaceful, not menacing. It was reconnecting with her own body, not as an object of Marcus's desire or the carrier of his child, but as her own vessel. The baby, a girl she had already decided to name Nora, was a constant, reassuring presence. Every kick and flutter was a reminder of what she was fighting for. This wasn't just about her anymore. She was building a new world for her daughter. A world built on honesty and resilience, not on secrets and glass walls. One day, Jasmine came home to find Amelia at the dining room table, surrounded by sketch pads and pencils, something she hadn't touched in years. She was designing a small, sustainable home, a cottage with clean lines, large windows to let in the natural light, and a connection to the garden. Her hands moved with a forgotten confidence, the lines on the page bold and sure. "What's this?" Jasmine asked softly. "It's my new life," Amelia said, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time in weeks. "I think I want to stay in Portland, start my own firm, a small one, focusing on sustainable, thoughtful design, homes for real people." Jasmine's eyes welled with tears. "That's the Amelia I remember." This was the turning point. The victim was receding, and the architect was re-emerging. She was not just escaping her old life. She was actively designing a new one. She opened a new bank account, found a small apartment to rent near Jasmine, and began the slow process of untangling her existence from Marcus's. It was during this fragile period of rebuilding that he found her. She was at a small cafe, sipping a decaf latte and sketching in her notepad. The bell over the door chimed, and a shadow fell over her table. She looked up, and her breath caught in her throat. It was Marcus. He looked terrible. He was thinner, his expensive suit rumpled, his eyes bloodshot and haunted. The cocksure charm was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate hunger. "Amelia," he breathed, his voice hoarse. The patrons of the quiet cafe glanced over. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs, a wild bird trapped in a cage. Her first instinct was to run. But then she looked down at her belly, felt Nora give a gentle kick, and the cold, hard resolve returned. She would not run. This was her town now. Her life. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. She didn't speak. She simply waited. The silence, her old weapon, descended upon the small table. "Please," he said, his voice cracking. Can we talk?" She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod and gestured to the chair opposite her. He sank into it, looking like a man who had been running for weeks. "I am so sorry," he began, the words he had texted 100 times. "There's no excuse. It was a moment of stupidity, of weakness. It meant nothing. You and the baby, you are my life." Amelia listened, her face a placid mask. She let him talk. Let him spin his narrative of regret and fear. He talked about his own fears of fatherhood, of feeling like he was losing himself. It was a masterful performance of vulnerability, the kind that had always worked on her before. But she wasn't the same woman. She had lived in the silence, had been forged in it. She could hear what was underneath his words. The selfishness, the desperation to regain control. When he finally ran out of words, his hands clutching a coffee cup he hadn't ordered, she finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of the last month. It wasn't a moment, Marcus. It was a choice. Many choices. The choice to lie over and over. The choice to bring another woman into our home. Into the home where I am building a nursery for our child. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. You didn't just break my trust. You desecrated something sacred. He flinched as if she had struck him. I can fix it. I will do anything. Therapy, counseling, anything. I love you. Amelia took a slow breath. I believe that you think you love me, Marcus. But you love yourself more. You love the idea of me. The idea of a perfect family that adds to your portfolio of success. But you don't know how to love a person. Not really. She gathered her things, her movements deliberate and calm. My lawyer, Jasmine, will be in touch with yours regarding the separation and a custody agreement for Nora. Nora? He whispered, the name of his unborn daughter sounding foreign on his tongue. Yes, Nora, Amelia said, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. You will be a part of her life, if you choose to be. But you and I, we are over. There is nothing left to fix. She stood up, tall and steady. For the first time, he looked small to her. A man dwarfed by the consequences of his own actions. Goodbye, Marcus. She walked out of the cafe, leaving him sitting alone amidst the smell of coffee and rain, the silence she left behind more damning than any scream could ever be. She didn't look back. She was walking toward her new life. A life she was building with her own 2 hands, one line at a time. The last 2 months of Amelia's pregnancy were a period of intense, focused creation. She threw herself into her work with a fervor she hadn't felt in years. She incorporated Amelia Heart Studio, renting a small sunlit office space above a bookstore. Her first client was a young couple who had bought a dilapidated bungalow and wanted to turn it into an energy-efficient family home. Amelia poured her heart into the project, her designs reflecting her newfound values, transparency, strength, and a seamless connection to the natural world. Her life settled into a quiet rhythm. Mornings were for design work, afternoons for walks and prenatal appointments, evenings for shared meals with Jasmine. She spoke to her parents regularly now, having finally told them the whole story. Their initial shock had given way to fierce, unwavering support. Her mother even flew out for a week to help her set up the new apartment, filling it with soft blankets and the smell of home-baked bread. She never heard from Marcus directly. All communication went through their lawyers. Jasmine reported that he was being surprisingly compliant. He had agreed to the separation terms, the generous child support, and had even set up a trust fund for Nora. There was no fight, no blustering threats. It was an eerie, unsettling capitulation. He's either playing a long game, or he's genuinely broken, Jasmine mused one night. It doesn't matter, Amelia replied, and she was surprised to find that she meant it. Her emotional well-being was no longer tethered to his state of mind. Her focus was singular, the arrival of her daughter. The contraction started on a Tuesday morning, the same day of the week her old life had ended. It was a drizzly, gray Portland day. She called Jasmine, her voice calm despite the tightening in her abdomen. It's time. The labor was long and arduous. It was a primal battle, a testament to the strength of her body. Jasmine was by her side the entire time, a rock of encouragement, wiping her brow, holding her hand. There were moments of doubt, moments when the pain was so immense she thought she couldn't go on. In those moments, She didn't think of Marcus's betrayal. She thought of the cottage she was designing, of the sunlit nursery she had prepared, of the tiny human she was fighting to bring into a world of her own making. Nora Elise Hart was born at 2:17 a.m., with a head full of dark hair and a cry that was startlingly robust. As the nurse placed the warm, squirming baby on her chest, Amelia felt a wave of love so powerful it recalibrated her entire universe. Every hardship, every tear, every moment of fear had led to this perfect, miraculous being. This was not the end of a story. This was the beginning. She looked at her daughter, her tiny fingers curled around her own. "Hello, Nora," she whispered, her voice thick with tears of joy. "It's just you and me. We're going to be okay." Meanwhile, in San Francisco, Marcus received the news via a sterile email from his lawyer. Ms. Hart gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Nora Elise Hart, this morning. Both mother and child are doing well. He was sitting in the penthouse, the same penthouse that now felt like a mausoleum. He'd been living in a self-imposed exile, surrounded by the ghosts of a life he'd had and lost. He had sold off a third of his company, a move that had stunned the market. He told his board it was to diversify his assets. But the truth was, he couldn't stand it anymore. The relentless drive, the hunger for more, it all felt hollow. The email was a gut punch. A daughter. Nora. He had a daughter, and he was 600 miles away. He hadn't been there for her birth. He hadn't heard her first cry. He had forfeited that right. The compliance Jasmine had found so surprising wasn't a legal strategy. It was penance. He knew he deserved nothing, so he asked for nothing. He walked into the nursery, the one Amelia had designed. He ran his hand over the soft gray walls, the hand-painted trees. This room was the purest thing in his life, and it was empty. The weight of his failure finally crushed him. It wasn't about losing a wife or a comfortable life. It was about the profound, irreversible loss of a family he had destroyed before it had even truly begun. For the first time since she'd left, Marcus Hart wept. Not tears of self-pity or frustration, but tears of genuine, soul-crushing grief. He wept for the man he should have been, for the father he might never get to be, and for the strong, incredible woman he had so carelessly broken, who had then refused to stay broken. He knew then that apologies and money were meaningless. If he ever wanted to be in his daughter's life, he couldn't be Marcus Hart, the tech mogul. He would have to tear himself down to the foundations and see if there was anything worth rebuilding. The path to redemption wouldn't be about winning Amelia back. It would be about becoming a man worthy of being Nora's father. A year passed. It was a year of firsts for Amelia and Nora. First smile, first laugh, first tooth, first steps. Amelia's business flourished. Her reputation for creating beautiful, livable, and sustainable homes grew by word of mouth. She was happy, a deep, quiet contentment that she had earned. She had a community of friends, a thriving career, and a daughter who was the sun in her sky. Marcus, true to the terms of the agreement, had stayed away. The child support payments arrived like clockwork, and once a month, a carefully chosen children's book would arrive in the mail, addressed to Nora. There was never a note, just the book. Goodnight Moon, the Velveteen Rabbit, Where the Wild Things Are. It was his only form of contact, a silent, consistent presence. Amelia had been in therapy for over a year. She had worked through the anger and the grief, and had come to a place of understanding. She understood that Marcus's actions were born from his own deep-seated fears and insecurities. It didn't excuse them, but it made him human, not a monster. On Nora's first birthday, a package arrived. It wasn't a book. It was a small, exquisitely carved wooden bird, a robin, with a note attached. It was the first time he had written, "Amelia, I know I have no right to ask for anything. I've spent the last year in intensive therapy, trying to understand the man I was and the damage I caused. I am not that man anymore. Or at least, I am trying not to be. I sold my company. I've stepped back from everything. I've been volunteering at a youth center here in the city, teaching coding to underprivileged kids. It doesn't absolve me of anything. But I am writing to ask. Not as your ex-husband, but as Nora's father. May I please meet my daughter? I will come to Portland. We can meet in a public park for an hour. Jasmine can be there. Whatever makes you feel safe. If you say no, I will understand. And I will not ask again. Happy birthday to our beautiful girl. Marcus. Amelia read the letter 3 times. There was no manipulation in it. No charming rhetoric. It was simple, direct, and humbled. She thought of the shelf of books he had sent. She thought of her daughter, who would one day ask about her father. Did she want to tell her that her father was a man who had made a terrible mistake, but had tried to atone for it? Or a man who had simply disappeared? She called Jasmine. He wants to meet her. What do you want to do? Jasmine asked, her voice neutral. Amelia looked at Nora, who was happily banging 2 wooden blocks together on the floor. I think it's time. They met the following Saturday at Laurelhurst Park. It was a bright, crisp autumn day. Amelia arrived with Nora in a stroller, Jasmine walking beside them like a guardian angel. Marcus was already there, sitting on a bench near the duck pond. He looked different. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. The restless energy was gone, replaced by a quiet stillness. He looked calm. When he saw them approach, he stood up slowly. His eyes were not on Amelia, but on the little girl in the stroller. A look of such profound, heart-wrenching awe crossed his face that Amelia felt an unexpected pang in her chest. Hi, he said softly. Hi, Marcus, Amelia replied. She knelt and unbuckled Nora. Nora, this is your dad. Marcus knelt too, so he was at Nora's level. He didn't reach for her. He just looked at her, his eyes filled with tears. Hello, Nora, he whispered. You are so beautiful. Just like your mom. Nora, unafraid, looked at this new face with wide, curious eyes. She reached out a chubby hand and patted his cheek. In that moment, something shifted. The past was not erased. The pain was not forgotten. But a new chapter was beginning. For the next hour, they sat by the pond. Marcus didn't talk about himself or what he'd been through. He asked about Nora. What did she like to eat? Did she sleep through the night? What was her favorite song? He listened with an intensity that Amelia had once mistaken for romantic passion, but now recognized as something deeper. A genuine desire to know his child. As they were leaving, Marcus turned to Amelia. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. This was everything. She deserves to know her father, Amelia said simply. Can I do this again? He asked, his vulnerability absolute. Amelia looked at Jasmine, who gave a subtle nod. We can talk about it, she said. That was the beginning. Marcus began flying up to Portland every other weekend. Their meetings were short, always in a park or at a children's museum. He was respectful of her boundaries, never pushing for more. He was slowly, painstakingly building a relationship with his daughter. And in the process, he was building a new kind of relationship with Amelia. One based not on romance, but on a shared, profound love for their child. There was no grand reconciliation. They did not get back together. The trust required for that kind of partnership had been irrevocably broken. But in its place, something else grew. A quiet respect. A functional, caring co-parenting dynamic. A different kind of family, forged in the ashes of a spectacular betrayal. One afternoon, about a year after their first meeting in the park, Amelia was watching from her apartment window as Marcus pushed Nora on a swing in the courtyard below. Nora's squeals of laughter carried on the wind. Marcus was laughing too, a real, unburdened laugh. He looked up and caught Amelia's eye. He smiled, a simple, grateful smile. Amelia smiled back. She was not the woman in the gilded cage anymore. She was the architect of her own life, a life filled with light and love and hard-won peace. Her redemption was not in forgiving him, but in building a world where his actions no longer had the power to hurt her. And his redemption, she realized, was not in winning her back, but in simply learning to be a good father. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better. It was real. Amelia's journey wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. She reclaimed her career, her independence, and her right to a peaceful life for herself and her daughter. Marcus's story shows us that redemption isn't about getting back what you lost, but about becoming worthy of what you hope to build in the future. Their story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away in silence, and that true power lies not in controlling others, but in mastering yourself. What did you think of Amelia's choice to leave without a word? Could you have done the same? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your perspectives. If this story of betrayal, strength, and complex redemption moved you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who appreciates a deep, emotional story. And be sure to subscribe to our channel for more fiction that feels like real life. Thank you for watching.